Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the modernization of healthcare IT and data center architecture and its criticality to success. This is another one in the series of virtual meetings that the New York State chapter of HIMSS is putting on. Next slide, please. Here's some of the logistics, folks. If you lose your connection, just take a look at this. You can also turn on the CC if you want to have that come in. Also, if you have any questions, go to the chat line, put your questions in there, and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can during the course of the day. This event will be recorded as usual, and it'll be placed not only up on our website, but it'll also go out to our YouTube page. Give us about 24 to 48 hours to get it up. Next slide, please. And always a little bit of promotion for our New York chapter. Please come and join our chapter. It's real easy. There's the link. There's the QR code. Come and be part of an exciting chapter that's always one step ahead of everybody. Next slide, please. Let me introduce you now to our moderator, Larry Zussman, who will introduce the speakers and talk about our event for the day. Larry, it's all yours.
Well, Anthony, I thank you and welcome everybody to what is going to be a very informative, engaging, and interesting conversation on what's going on with healthcare IT modernization today. I am Larry Zussman, and I'll be your moderator today for this webcast sponsored by Cisco. Let me start by saying that the great Greek philosopher Heraclitus is the person that said change is the only constant, and that is truer now in healthcare than ever before. Whether we're dealing with productivity requirements and speed and the exponential growth of data, whether it's mergers and acquisitions that are affecting us in every way, or it's dealing with this 100-year in a life cycle global pandemic that is changing the course of healthcare forever. Healthcare IT modernization has never been more important. And I want to share with you what we're going to cover today so you have a sense of what this webcast is about. First, we're going to explore healthcare IT modernization and what it might look like and what it does look like, and the factors to consider as your organization makes the journey from legacy systems to today's architectures. From there, we're going to move to the hybrid cloud discussion and how do you make that transition and deploy hybrid cloud safely and securely. And finally, we're going to talk about the Epic EHR system as well as others and how the expansion of those systems open up infrastructure in new ways and bring more opportunities in the data center. We have what would be considered an esteemed panel of guests, and I'd like to introduce them now briefly to you and tell you who we have. First, Chris Goff, who is in Intel Corporation and serves as the general manager of the Health and Life Sciences Group. We have Surikant Kale, who is the CTO of the Albany Medical Health Center, as well as vice president of information technology, management, and infrastructure. We have Ash Kilcarney from Cisco. He handles the director of solutions integration. And we're really pleased that Ash is with us because he has experience on both sides. He's been involved in healthcare organizations inside, in IT, and now he has an opportunity to listen to a lot of companies and organizations and help them with the challenges they face every day. And we have Jeffrey Lutz, CTO of New York City Health and Hospitals, which is one of the largest healthcare organizations in the world. So with that, what I'd like to do is return to Jeffrey and give him a chance to reintroduce himself as we start this journey together. Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can move on to the next individual on the panel.
Certainly, and thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, and appreciate being a member of this this great group. So, right, my name is Jeffrey Lutz, and I am the Chief Technology Officer here at New York City Health and Hospitals. I have been a member here, part of the teams for a little over 11 years now, serving in varying roles, and been fortunate to be a part of our growth and our change throughohout that time. And Larry, I think you said it well. Sometimes we kind of joke our only consistency is our change, and because it's constantly happening and constantly evolving, and it's one of the things that I do enjoy most in working in this environment and within healthcare. But during my time here at New York City Health and Hospitals, I've ranged anywhere from a project manager to working for what we call the business applications, to working my way through the infrastructure, to where now I'm fortunate to lead the team as our Chief Technology Officer, and look forward to the challenges in our discussion today. With that, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague here, Siri Kant.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Laurie. And I'm more than happy to be part of this panel because this particular topic is very exciting, and everybody's talking about the transformation. I'm Surya Kale. I'm the CTO and the VP of Information System at Albany Medical Center, Albany Med Systems. Before I joined Albany Med a year ago, a little bit more than a year. It's 16 months. But before that, I was the other side of the table, which is providing the. I worked for the VAR for more than 12 years, providing the solutions and services for the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 organization. So every time we talk about the transformation, we talk about the change. So I've been that whole process, and the thing that I learned from the business or the customer is more towards everybody's thinking that, okay, they are making the transformation, but there's a gray area between change and the transformation. So the change is basically you're making your past much better for tomorrow, but the transformation is more about you're creating that, innovating a services or platform that is not existing in your portfolio today, but trying to give that solution or the platform for the future growth and the innovation, which will target more on the business outcome, more towards the customer requirement or the business requirement. So that is where we need to make sure that what we are trying to do, we are making the change better, or we are making the transformation to make the business outcome more valuable for our end user or customer. So more than happy to continue this conversation and very, very excited to be part of the panel. So looking forward to talk to you all on the call.
Thank you, Sir. Okay. Appreciate your involvement. And let me turn now to Ash Kulkarni in the Cisco organization. Ash.
Thanks, Larry. First of all, really happy to be here with such an esteemed panel. And as Larry said, I've been on the other side. I've been at Cisco as part of the healthcare practice that Cisco has put together under customer experience for a little over a year. My current role is, of course, I am director over solutions integration. So really trying to bring to life all healthcare use cases from a Cisco's standpoint, whether it is Cisco products technologies and or partner products technologies. But having said that, prior to that, I was part of the couple of provider organizations, very large healthcare systems, so to say, being there, done that from IT infrastructure operation standpoint, part of the transformation journeys, modernization journeys, implementation, large system implementations like Epic, Cerner, so on and so forth. And also have solution software development experience, especially for healthcare. So that's kind of a varied horizontal experience that I have, and really, as Jeff and as Suryakant said, really, the transformation and the change is constant, and more so now than ever. From a healthcare IT standpoint, it is the need of the day. Looking forward to having a great conversation here and share my experiences as well as listen to others.
Thank you, Ash. Appreciate that. And it's my real pleasure to have you introduce yourself. Chris from Intel, one of the senior people in the organization who can really give us some insight, I think, into how Intel's technology is changing our opportunities. Chris.
Thank you, Larry. A pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I lead our healthcare business, health and life sciences business, I should say, at Intel. We have lots of people that work directly with healthcare providers, payers, governments, pharmaceutical companies, and we do that so we can really get a good understanding for what business challenges they're experiencing and how our technology could possibly help address those. So I've got a number of experts on my team who understand all the Intel technology that exists, everything that's coming, and it's our job to figure out how can make a difference in some of those key use cases. We work with great our great partner ecosystem. Cisco is a great partner. How can we weave our tech innovations into the solutions that our partners are bringing to market to really address those key challenges? And then finally, taking feedback back to business leaders, to R&D leaders at the company, if gaps or shortcomings in our products or our initiatives are identified, making sure that we are constantly improving and what we bring to the market is a better fit for health and life sciences organizations. Once again, thank you.
Great. So my thanks to all of you for joining us in this webcast, and I know the conversations are going to be very interesting. So many of you are involved in the journey from legacy to today's technology, going through a lot of changes in infrastructure, going through a lot of changes in your organization overall, and how IT can serve all the different facets within your healthcare organization. And I thought it best that we start the discussion with Jeffrey from New York City Health and Hospitals, because Jeffrey has been on this path for a while and has a good understanding of how this journey takes place. And in some ways, he's almost at the light at the end of the tunnel, although it turns out the tunnel just keeps getting longer and longer as you go. But I think he can give us some insight into the process of how it takes place, what you got to, the things you need to think about, the challenges you'll face along the way, and how you can overcome them. So without further ado, let me move to Jeffrey first, and let's get a sense of what they went through as they went through this modernization. Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. If we could put up the slide,
Sure.
that'll help me as well.
Absolutely.
So while we're doing that, and yes, as just appropriately it said, we've been on this journey since I've been here back in 2011, but really started in earnest in 2012, and it truly is a journey, not necessarily a destination. My team gives me a hard time. I do tend to talk in cliches from time to time, but I do find that they help me out. But my goal really here today is give you guys some of the observations and lessons that we've learned to really make this a successful journey. And just as you said, it feels like every time that we've come close to reaching the light, it goes a little bit further. But I also look at that as part of the challenge, and really helping to continue to challenge the team and bring them to another level of thinking. So, in the first piece is really again an evolution, not a revolution, right? It is slow steps sometimes. Sometimes they're big steps. Sometimes they're smaller steps, and sometimes some of these, they could be technology. As the advent of cloud, telehealth. A lot of these other outside services. It could be regulatory. It could be, just like outside COVID, or even, early on for us as well, Sandy. These outside influences, you don't know where they're going to come, and you need to be able to react and understand and adjust. How do you meet those needs and readjust your vision and where you want to go in order to better address those needs and understand not only what needs to change, but what are some of the things that you've done right so that you can continue those practices as well. Centralization and standardization. You want to make sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction. That was a challenge that we had early on. For those that may or may not be familiar, with New York City Health and Hospitals, we were made up of 11 different networks. It had 11 different instances of Quadramed. Everybody were on different versions. They work differently, and so anytime you wanted to upgrade, anytime you wanted to move things, to change or adjust processes or do items across the organization, it was a challenge, and a lot of integration to it. But by centralizing and standardizing a lot of this, we didn't want to take away the freedom and the input that each of those facilities had. That it's important. They are different. They're unique in what their needs are, but we also need to make an understanding of what's good decisions for the whole and all of health and hospitals as well. At the same time, you need support. You need support. It can't be a grassroots movement. It's got to get support from the top. And we've been fortunate to have some great CIOs over the years, as well as not only the CIO support, but it's support from their peers as well. And they're helping to drive that mission. They're helping to provide, because they're partners. They need to be a part of it. And they need to drive some of these things. As we went to our journey to Epic, as we'll talk about, and consolidated, we're now on one instance. We took each of those 11 instances and now we're on one instance of Epic. And and one of the important taglines of the entire time is, it's not an IT project. This is the business. It's the business. The clinicians are the ones that are using the system. That's important for them. In order to be usable, they've got to have their input and they've got to be a part of it. And it's important for them to have that dialogue, because as you go through this transformation, you're creating the tools, is the way we look at it, to enable them to do their job, and in the case, treat our patients better and provide better care and better service for them. So we're an enabler within it. We can help lead, but if they're not going to leverage those solutions, they're not going to take advantage of it, then we're wasting a lot of people's time and effort into that. And which was, and especially within our last leadership group, it was always an interesting piece when somebody would come up, and fortunate to have a lot of people that have been here for a long time, and but when somebody would come up and say, we've always done it this way, that automatic right came up the red flag, and now they really dug in. Well, okay, that's great, but is there a way to do it better? And if we're running into challenges with the process, maybe the process needs to also evolve. It's not just a technology challenge, but maybe it's a process challenge. So these are some of the different lessons that we've learned to help us along this journey as we've gone, and helped for us to make it successful as well within this time frame. But we continue to look forward to the future, continue to challenge and look for how we can keep readjusting and climbing that new peak and looking for that new horizon.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to come back to you, Jeff, and try to get you to define some of the critical challenges you faced and some of the ways you went over them. I'll let you think about that. But in the meantime, let's move to Suricant. Suricant is at Albany Medical Center, and they're in a whole different stage of the journey, as we say. When we had a chance to speak with Suricant, it became clear to me that they're really, in some ways, looking at this from the beginning and starting to see how can we put all this together, because there's a lot of moving parts. So Suricant, you can explain that and talk about some of the challenges you're facing and how you're handling this as you go through the whole healthcare IT modernization for Albany Medical Center and the companies you serve in addition to it.
Sure. Thanks, Larry. And
sure.
As Jeff mentioned, right? So everybody's has the same challenges, the pain point that they have to overcome to drive some of these business initiatives, some of these IT initiatives. So it's always come down to those three different pillars, right? So people, processes, and technology. So we always go into the circle saying that, okay, where we need to, which has a bigger pie and which is going to driving most of this conversation. And when it comes to the change and the transformation initiatives. So before I start, I think everybody knows on the call that we were Albany Medical Center before. Now our new name is going to be Albany Med Health System. When I say health system, basically, it's not acquisition or merger, it is affiliation. So we are affiliated with additional 4 more hospitals within the Northeast. So when we say affiliation, so it still be the another challenge that comes with that every affiliation has their own environment, one siloed architecture, their own branding, their own application. So that is one of the big challenge when we do this kind of affiliation, and talking about, I think one of the point that Jeff mentioned, centralization and standardization is going to be the huge challenges to bring that to the table, because that is going to drive most of the business outcome from the business point of view, but also from the IT perspective is going to bring down the challenges in terms of the operational model as well as the financial model. So those are the big challenges that been in the affiliation phase. We have 4 different campuses. Every campus has their own business models, their business processes, their business skill set, that the technology talent within that particular silo, as well as the technology landscape is changing in each of those campuses. So one of the biggest initiative for us to make this change or the transformation is going to be standardizations, rationalizations, consolidation, to drive some of those business requirement. Now everybody's talking about the one patient, one record. That is going to be the next change in the healthcare market, because every patient has a different requirement, and that is going to drive a lot of information about how we can have that predictive analytics or predictive information for that specific patients. That is going to drive, if that is my outcome of the business, if I take that as an end goal, then if you do the reverse and saying that what I need to be, what are the processes we need, what kind of talents that we need, and what is the technology that can support that business outcome. So we take those data from our business executive, business stakeholders, and see what are the requirements that the business outcome is required to drive this transformation. Another thing that we see, because of there is too many applications, so I can just give a number. Across all 4 campuses, we have close to 1,600 applications. Now, as a part of this whole transformation and the change, we're going to say how many applications is going to be rationalized, consolidate. Cloud could be the one choice, or when we bring the new EHR platform to the table, how many other applications is going to be a part of that out of the box capabilities from that particular EHR platform. Security concerns and the controls. As an affiliation, every campus has their own security policies, their own security postures. How are we going to maintain and standardize the posture and the policy across all 4 campuses? That is another big challenge that we have, and we are working towards that. So we have a very good handle on the security policies, postures that we can deploy across the board. Another thing is definitely we are talking about the digital transformation definition from each of those campuses is going to be different. So we want to make sure that there has to be an alignment between the business and the IT. That's the only way we can be successful in future, once we have that alignment from both the direction. The biggest challenge that we mentioned, I think Jeffrey also touched on, is the talent skill set. That is going to be another challenge that we are facing, because being a different technology, being a different landscape, being a different application stacks, managing, once we do this consolidation, skill set is going to be the critical thing for the organization to run. So those are the few challenges that we face, and we are working towards that, how to make people, processes, and technology work together to be successful.
I think it's a valiant effort, sir, certainly, to try to put all those pieces together and to get all those affiliates working on one platform in one way. It's very interesting. And you raised the whole idea of one patient, one record, and I immediately come to me the whole idea of the personalization of medicine now, and personalized medicine, and how it's so important to know exactly everything about that individual, all the way down into the chromosomes and the genes, with all the things that are going on, with all the therapies and technologies. So it's going to raise all kinds of issues in the IT space moving forward. Things are changing awful fast. And that brings me to Ash, who has been on both sides of the coin. Ash, give us your perspective from both the standpoint of what you were dealing with before you moved to the side of the solutions environment within Cisco, but what were you dealing with as a person basically within the healthcare organizations, and what challenges were you facing? And then perhaps maybe some insight into what are the challenges you see now as you talk to customers and engage with them as on their modernization journey. I think it'd be very helpful to understand that.
Sure, thanks, Larry. I can just say, right, all of the above, what Jeff and Suryakant said in terms of what challenges I faced when I was running IT operations or trying to address those situations. Um, uh, to Suryakant's point, right? So I was working for a for-profit healthcare organization there. The way they grew was M&A. So we were operating across 16 states, 120 different facilities, hospital systems, but also locally branded. So that's kind of a setup. So how do you manage that local branding, but also bring the efficiencies of centralization, standardization? With M&A, you are just going into affiliation, but with M&A, we really own those IT operations. And then how do I really standardize that and bring the not only the cost down, because these are all healthcare traditionally has been a legacy heavy environment. And what I mean by that is all legacy applications. Suryakant mentioned 1,600 applications. I can relate to that. We had 1,800 applications, of course, across 100 systems, right? How do you bring them down to a reasonable level so you're not, one, duplicating, two, bringing the cost down, so on and so forth. So those are some of the challenges that definitely I faced through my journey as a IT infrastructure person. But moving on this side, I kind of feel talking to healthcare customers. What we are seeing today is add on to what I already said, right? Suryakant mentioned one patient, one record. I'm saying that it's not just going to stay at a local healthcare system level. It actually has to be at the global level. There are regulatory changes that are happening that is, with interoperability and the rules and regulations that are coming out, you need that record accessible, available at the global level, not just at your local hospital system level. And then IT infrastructure needs to be set up in such a way that you are able to comply with those regulatory changes. So those are the challenges I'm seeing, in talking to our healthcare customers. Hybrid work environment, COVID brought to the forefront that we need to be set up in a way that we are able to work remotely as well as on-site. Healthcare cannot be fully remote. We all know that. People will have to be on-site. But there are other roles that really don't have to be on-site. And how do you, create a secure infrastructure where people can be anywhere where they are, but still be able to work seamlessly and be able to access the resources that they need to make the work happen. Clinician burnout. I don't want to sound cliche, but it's a real thing. And how do you bring that technology transformations into your healthcare organization to address those, make it easier, trying to bring in some automation orchestration so the administrative tasks can be taken over by the technology platforms so the clinicians can be doing their real work of patient care and then reduce their burnout. So some of those challenges are really what we are looking at. And then, of course, right, with the change, and we'll talk more from a digital transformation standpoint, all these new technologies, IoT, explosion of data, how do you bring that data back to actually meaningful use so you can improve efficiencies, operational and otherwise, in your environment?
Yeah, and I think the three of you have basically defined an environment that is ever changing and evolving and requiring faster, more efficient, and more flexible kinds of environments. And that brings me to Chris, because that is what Intel basically is dealing with, is saying, okay, so this is what's happening. How can we support that? How can we help get people to where they need to go? So Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I just start by saying, a really good framing of the problem. I think in my view, there's just even before COVID hit, there was a supply and demand challenge in healthcare. People are getting 1 in 3 people in the world have multiple chronic conditions. There's more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. We hit that crossover point a couple of years ago. Even pre-COVID, there was an anticipated shortage of 30 million caregivers, in the coming years. And now, just like other segments of the economy, with a great resignation, people leaving the workforce, it's a huge problem. The burnout and caregiver shortage is a huge problem, obviously, for healthcare providers. So I think the role of technology is really to help make your resources more efficient. Yeah, how can you target your scarce human capital where it's needed most. Predictive analytics was mentioned earlier. Intel has huge investments across the board in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and really baking those capabilities right into our mainstream processors and components, so that these kinds of applications that use these capabilities can run as efficiently and cost effectively as possible. Really with the mainstream line. So we're doing everything we can from software enablement. We've got over 15,000 software developers at Intel optimizing industry software to run as efficiently as it can in the underlying hardware. But I want us to really help grow that ecosystem, make it more the default way things are done. Baking machine learning capabilities right into the core applications, so that we can have that stratification across the patient population and really reach out to those high risk patients, prevent negative outcomes from happening, rather than responding to those negative outcomes after they happen, after the fact.
Yeah, but technology is changing rapidly. And I mean, the whole concept of IoT and what that means in a healthcare environment, and how Intel is basically looking at it from a standpoint of how do we basically make sure securely and safely you can manage every device that's running within that environment for either patients or for the organization overall is a really big question. And so I'm glad we're addressing it today and talking about it. I think it's important as we move forward. So I appreciate all of the panel's insight into the modernization question. Before we leave this topic and move into some of the questions about the way people are deploying strategies for enabling modernization, let me come back to Jeff. And Jeff, as we look at this group that's listening to this webcast, we have a lot of different individuals, and many of them are exactly where you are in terms of dealing with this issue. What would you say is the primary takeaway that you've learned in this journey, and something you'd want to tell the audience about, something they need to think about as they embark on this from legacy process to today's technology?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I for me, I would say, because I have taken this role taken this journey from someone that wasn't in a position of leadership to now where I'm fortunate to be in a position of leadership, and I guess what I would say is it's what I found, especially at least here, it's relationships, and meaning that you take the time. When I first started here, one of the projects I was on, I would call up to a facility and say that I was from central office, and they'd hang up on me. Or I'd walk down the hall, and I didn't, after a while, I would stop telling people I was from central office. But I found that as I went out, engaged at each of the facilities, got to know the individuals there, listened, but also not just understood their concerns, but understood the business, understood what their challenges were, understood their voice. It allowed me to better address their needs and understand where those challenges were coming from, and why we made decisions. And the other thing that I found so incredible within healthcare is, it's not within your organization, but the ability within healthcare to share and to across organizations and lean on those individuals, build those relationships, and as people move on, continue with those relationships. And that networking and learning, and finally it's listening and understanding, and then applying it and getting their feedback. I would say that for me is really been truly what's helped to make at least me and I find this piece successful for it.
It's interesting listening to you, Jeff. It mirrors the opinion of the great CEOs that drive our organizations all over the world today, and how they talk about how they sit down with their teams and try to understand what their requirements are before they go to work, and try to understand what those needs are within the whole organization. Do a lot of listening, and it makes them a lot smarter. And the many CEOs have always said that that is the way you run an organization. So clearly you're on the right path for sure in the way you approach this. Sir Kant, you're in a different position. How are you dealing with all the challenges you're facing, and what do you think the takeaway is from your standpoint of people who are trying to do what you're trying to do, which is to take a bunch of affiliated organizations and kind of make them one with one voice and one architecture, essentially?
Sure. So as Jeff mentioned, right? So we are in the same path and the challenges. But one thing that I see, I think everybody agree on the call, IT was always considered as a order taker, right? Okay, do this, do that, and we need this, we need that when we need it. But we never ever ask why you need it. So now the question has to change, the paradigm has to change. We have this, they call it a golden circle, right? So we have the what we are trying to do, how we do it, and why we do it. So we always come from the outside in, which is basically the outer circle is also always what. And then middle section is more technology driven, because once we know what we are doing, we know how to do it, because we are technology savvy people. We know how technology runs and how technology gets implemented. But the middle circle, which is going to be very critical, that is basically the business requirement, business outcome, business, what do you call that? Requirement strategy, basically. So we never talk about why we need this. We always say, okay, yeah, somebody asked me to create 10 VMs, I create 10 VMs. If somebody say I need 10 terabyte, I give them 20 terabyte, because I don't want to come back and ask for more storage. So we have to start changing the mindset. We need to be a partner with our business. So IT need to be partner with the business to make sure that we sit next to each other and understand what the business is asking us to do. And then that will create more dynamics and the communications. The communication channel is should be very transparent between the business and the IT. That will be a huge success for benefit for the success on the transformation journey as well as the change journey. So basically, what we learned from last 1 year or 16 months is that, okay, not necessarily the technologies be the bottom, because I know that the business and the healthcare system, all my doctors, my nurses, my clinical staff is very much eager to save. Their primary role is to save lives, which is definitely the goal of this whole healthcare industry. But behind the scene, we are also, my goal is to make sure that I can protect the data. So the data is going to be critical for this particular institution or for every institution. So we want to make sure that what we are trying to do here, protect the data. That will definitely help us to drive the frontline requirement in terms of the collecting the data, make the sense out of the data, analyze the data. So be more proactive rather than more reactive. So those are the things definitely help me understanding the business need, and sitting in the cabinet meeting, sitting in the board meeting, sitting in the CIO forum meeting, that help us to understand where the business is, what's the business roadmap, what's the business strategy look like. If you look at the Albany Medical Center, we are not in just the healthcare trauma center, but we are also in the education and research center. We have a medical college here, so we have to make sure that we can bring the environment such that so we can bring the talent and create the healthcare SMEs within our campus. They can provide the similar services to our community as well as our business. So we are healthcare, we are education, we are the research center. So those are and every unit has their own requirement. So it's being in the part of that particular business discussion or conversation, which is helping us to be more proactive rather than the reactive mode. So yeah, definitely totally. This conversation, communication is key. The business conversation is the key. And once we have that information, which will also help us to know, it all ties to the funding, because healthcare is not the richest industry, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we have to make use of it and deliver the services, deliver the technology in a right way and right fashion at the right time.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think it's wise kind of counsel in terms of how to think about this. Ash, what are your takeaways? Just give us a few takeaways over the years.
Sure, definitely. As Jeff and Surikant said, right, you have to align with the business outcomes. What the business wants, right? IT needs to be the enabler, not the just slapping the technology for the sake of it. So you really need to look at what is the business wants to do, right? And it could be based on what service lines they have, right? It could be based on what services they want to offer, and it all kind of combination of that. But understanding those business priorities, those strategy points, and then bringing in the IT infrastructure and the technology components that will enable to achieve those outcomes will be the key. That has been what helped me so far, and that is what I will say will be the key going forward.
Great, great. Chris, well, how does Intel view this modernization challenge, and how does it see it playing a role in really affecting it? What's the help that Intel can provide, and what's the takeaways that you have found are helpful for people to understand as they go through the modernization process?
Well, I would say our role is really to, when it comes to modernization, make the infrastructure more efficient, more cost effective, more scalable. The hardware itself, Intel is largely a component supplier, isn't enough to get there. So we work very closely with software partners, with infrastructure partners, work hand in hand with them to really optimize their software to make sure it's taking advantage of all the tech innovation and features that we put into our processors and other hardware components. The architectures are also getting a bit more complex. There's different options for at the memory tier now with persistent memory and traditional DRAM. What applications benefit from that? So there's lots of benchmarking, lots of testing, and we've got whole teams that turn all the knobs, push all the buttons to really find the most efficient and best recipes, to deploy some of these applications like hybrid cloud across software-defined infrastructure, like the VMwares, the Red Hats, the Cisco, of course, and we have those recipes. In a lot of cases, our partners, develop their solutions around those. Sometimes, healthcare organizations can just take them and deploy them, the way they are. But really, it's about making that maximizing the TCO and reducing the complexity for IT organizations to try and manage these environments.
Chris, if you don't mind, and Larry, if you don't mind, can I just chime in with what Chris just said? Because we are a big Intel shop as well as Cisco shop. So guys, thank you very much for your partnership here. I think, Chris, what you just mentioned, we are looking into that like a do more with less. That is, and we are, I can say, we are 97% virtualized today. Now with the VMware stack, memory is always one-to-one relationship, and buying a more hardware, memory is very expensive in that hardware. So with your opt-in technology, definitely we are using that features and functionality which help us to bring the data closer to the CPU so that we can take advantage of the faster, better performance for all of that data. Basically, we are trying to minimize, bring the data closer to this processor to get the better performance out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, there's opportunities, depending on the application, there's opportunities to increase the overall memory pool at either the same cost or maybe keep the memory pool the way it is and reduce cost, and really try and maximize the density of virtual machines or containers. We have a big effort around Kubernetes and Docker and the whole container infrastructure as well, and of course Tanzu through VMware. But we introduced that technology a couple of years ago, Optane, and now it's part of VMware's recommended configuration for their infrastructure. I think that the ecosystem, if you will, is and now learned where to apply that technology and where it can have the biggest impact to get some of the benefits that Serkan just mentioned.
Yeah, I think we've touched on data and the importance of data. We'll go back to that again in our conversation. But what I'd like to turn to now is the whole question of hybrid cloud. It comes up in every single conversation, no matter who you're talking to, as it relates to modernization and healthcare IT. And with it comes the whole question of the securing the customer data and the issue of where does the data lie and how do I manage that and how do I build a hybrid architecture that really makes sense between the on-prem environment. There's so many moving pieces and parts. So what I'd like to do is move to Ash. And Ash, I know you have a good slide that kind of tells the story, and maybe you can give everybody a little bit of a framework for how you might look at where hybrid cloud fits into your architecture from a healthcare IT perspective. What's going on as things in the moving parts and pieces in the hybrid cloud architecture, and how does that fit basically between the hybrid cloud, the on-prem, and where does the whole security and safety come in? So if you help us with that, that would be great. And if you want me to bring up your slide, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, please bring up the slide. And then I'll add one more thing, and then I'll get into the hybrid cloud, right? As we were talking earlier, right? And as Chris mentioned, right, you have to benchmark. There are certain tools I wish I had known and used in the past. Looking back, hindsight is always 2020. Tools like HIMSS Analytics has a model, like infrastructure adoption model. They have various models, right? EMR adoption model. They have different adoption models, but talking about today's conversation and IT infrastructure, they have an infrastructure adoption model, and then using that assessment helps you benchmark yourself and know where you stand from IT infrastructure standpoint, and then you can compare with what the business is looking for from a capability standpoint, and then you can match those back to the infrastructure and say, is your infrastructure set to deliver those capabilities? If not, what it will take to get there, right? And that's part of one of the services that, as a healthcare practice we offer at Cisco is, do that in frame assessments and help you, with your journey. Having said that, let's talk about hybrid cloud. Cloud used to be a buzzword. Healthcare always said no. I want to protect my data. I cannot have my data go anywhere except my four walls. Having said that, cloud is very much here and a reality, and you cannot escape it. How do you approach it? How do you consume it? How do you, bring your organization in a world where cloud is a reality? Is really is what we need to look at as IT professionals here, and take our organization through that journey. This is just a depiction that our team came up with in terms of how we view today's healthcare infrastructure needs to be, as well as taking into consideration the reality of the public-private clouds. It's not going to be one shoe fits all. It's not going to be one thing and not other. It's going to be all of the above. And when I say that, and if you look at this slide, right, I mean, you have a public cloud, you have SaaS providers, every EHR vendor have their own hosting, like Epic, Cerner, so on and so forth. ServiceNow is another tool that most of the healthcare organizations use for their IT processes. So all those are hosted privately by those vendors and offered as a service, software as a service, right? So you have those vendors out there. Then down there, you see different healthcare organization setups. On the left, what you see is a single facility, right? I'm a healthcare system. I have a single hospital. That's what you look like. You can be a healthcare facility like Jeff's organization or Siricon's organization here. There are multiple facilities, ambulatory surgical centers, clinics. So that's what the middle section depicts there is like a regional healthcare system, right? Where you have more like a hub and spoke model. And then on the right is really a depiction of what a data center looks like, where what your infrastructure sits today. Most of your application stacks resides today is in your data center, right? It can be primary, there will be secondary, so on and so forth, on multiple data centers. But what you're looking at is really bringing this all together and then keeping security to the front and center. And that's really what the middle section there calls about, right? You have to have different tools. You have to think about identity and access management across the universe now, not just inside your four walls. You have to make sure the data in transit, the data at rest is secured. You have to make sure that there's no security measures are in place by these public cloud providers like AWS, Azure, and so on and so forth, as well as the private cloud providers. And then you really have to think about that remote worker I was talking about earlier, right? And that, how do you get that worker into your environment, give them access to the resources they need wherever those workloads are, whether they are inside your data center, at the private cloud, public cloud. And then how do you approach this journey, right? There are ways you can do that. It is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to start looking at the workloads. The first one, in my opinion, is what you can take to the cloud as your business workloads, right? Your emails, your business suite applications. Those are easy targets, in my opinion, that can take you to the cloud. And when I say to the cloud, you also have to think about the connectivity. How do I access it? A typical healthcare organization, the way we are connected to the internet across multiple facilities, we backhaul all that traffic to our primary data center to go out. That increases, puts in latency. How do I address that? If I want to take something to the cloud and a remote worker or a remote facility has to access that, how do I improve the latency? The technologies like SD-WAN, offloading at the edge, right? So those things needs to be considered as part of your cloud initiative and journey. And this architecture is really trying to call those out. I'm going to pause and let others chime in, but that's what we think from a Cisco standpoint here as a team that we came together. This is how we think of hybrid cloud environment and a future of healthcare IT infrastructure looks like.
So thank you for that, Ash. I think that gives people a real overview of all the different options that are available and how it's all put together. But in a real world environment, Jeffrey, how are you thinking about using hybrid cloud, and how are you ensuring the safety and privacy question that's been raised for years?
That's a great question, and it's an interesting balance. For us, is it the approach to cloud, and Ash had kind of said it well. For a long while we were very adverse to it, and part of it was because right within the advertisement of the cloud, all of your information's in the cloud and is accessible from everywhere. Hey, that's a great thing. But from a security and compliance perspective, it's their ultimate nightmare, right? So who is that's everywhere that's getting to it? But these days, as you mentioned, email, but we're even going into an understanding these days of we just entered into agreement with Omnicell. So the dispensaries that they have on the floor for medications now are actually going to be controlled through the cloud. Wow. So, but that's information then that's also feeding back into our system inside of Epic, right? And information from Epic that's feeding up to it, right? So now you have to understand, and the cloud is just another piece. The way we're looking at it, it's another item in our utility belt. And like Ash said, you really have to start looking at and understanding how are these transactions moving, and how do you eliminate that legacy, the latency that's in there. We're recently we're just finishing one of our first, but we're moving to two new data centers, and part of that decision was to provide better cloud adjacency, if you will, to our end users and to the systems as well, because where we hosted one internally, but the partner that we were with did not provide us a lot of those options. And so and it's not only from a technology perspective, but like you said, it's also then the security perspective, and they're ones that we've had to partner with very, very closely, but because again, you see every place all over the news, everywhere, right? The efforts that everybody's got these days, breaches and the cost of the breaches, but at the same time, as you layer on these types of technologies and the scanning and the privacy, you've also got to be sensitive to that user experience, right? So it becomes a very difficult balance to make sure that we're protecting them, but we're not locking stuff so hard and far away from them that it becomes inaccessible to anybody.
Yeah, that makes sense.
it is definitely, you know, and partnering with, you know, a group, you know, partners like Cisco really helps for us to take a look at. And the only other piece I will add is piece that we've started working with them on, and a lot of our other partners as well, is the monitoring and visibility tools as well, so that we get a better understanding of our environment now to see where these interruptions may come in. We're leveraging tools like Thousand Eyes and the like in there to improve our visibility and really look at how these transactions traverse our environment.
I think you've raised lots of interesting points. I mean, clearly the issue, maybe on the good news side of this whole thing, is that once healthcare and other institutions got involved with hybrid cloud and kind of dipped their toe in, the security tools really ramped up. And the organizations really said to themselves, they're not moving to hybrid cloud unless it is secure. So we need to build the technologies that can really enable that. And so there's been a rash of security technologies introduced that are really designed to support the hybrid cloud environment. And that's a great thing, to tell you the truth. Surikant, what are your thoughts on this, as you probably are putting that into the whole equation as you move forward to hybrid cloud, of where it's going to fit into your architecture? If I was to jump ahead a year from now, what do you think is really running on hybrid cloud, and how is it put together?
Thanks, Larry. I think what Jeff did mention, I think we are in the similar boat again because of the architecture. So one thing that we look at from the hybrid cloud perspective, right? We have a on-premises data center, which we call as a private cloud. We do have a SaaS-based application, which is sitting in the public cloud as well. It's a private cloud and the public cloud. So all of our Office 365 suites, as well our ERP systems, is sitting as a SaaS-based applications. So that now we entertain ourselves in the private cloud or the on-premises as well as the public. But we do have the requirement in the application that can be close to the public cloud, but can satisfy the business requirement. So data location, as I mentioned before, is going to be critical factor to decide where the application is going to sit for the long run. That is going to be the critical decision making, which is going to drive network access, the security requirement, the compliance requirement. I think one of the questions I saw on the chat windows in the international security policies or compliance policies, GDPR is going to definitely be the key to consider as a part of the HIPAA compliance or PI compliance, as well as GDPR compliance, because data compliance is definitely the key to protect and make sure that the data is going to be accessible to your end user at the right time and from the right location. So you have to look at the data location, you have to look at the compliance requirement, your data residency requirement, as well as network access. While doing that, we want to make sure that I cannot have one tier in on-premises and the second tier, like for example, database tier in my on data center, web tier and the application tier in the cloud. That is going to be a very chatty conversation. So you have to really think about the whole business application rather than just the specific technology stack. That can give you a lot of benefits for your transformation. So one of the things that we are looking at, I just mentioned, we have another co-location or disaster recovery site. When I say disaster, it's going to be hot and cold data center. We have a tier 1 applications that is going to be active. Then if there is a tier 2, tier 3, it's going to be active passive. But at the same token, that particular site is not going to be the business continuity site or location, but also our cyber recovery location, because now there is a new norms in the industry, right? So you have a backup strategy, you have a disaster recovery strategy that is different than what you need to have is a cyber recovery strategy. So that is definitely different things that is changing our mindset to make that particular paradigm shift from business continuity to the cyber recovery requirement. And that is where we are looking at the hybrid cloud to reduce our the RPOs, RTO, as well as the cost, but at the same time to maintain the security postures and the data locality for our business. So that's the angle that we are looking at for the hybrid cloud.
You know, I mentioned the security angle and the fact that there's so many technologies now driven, by hybrid cloud to be more secure. And Chris, it's interesting that Intel's joined us today. It's great because it's one of the areas you're focused on. So tell us some of the things you're doing to kind of create a more secure environment in healthcare. both on-premise and hybrid cloud?
Yeah, I would say from Intel technology perspective, we've got a couple roles when it comes to security. One is reducing the performance penalty for deploying security technology. So that would be an example of that would be like crypto acceleration or compression acceleration. So for example, we've worked closely with InterSystems, who's of course Epic's database vendor, to bake some of these capabilities into their database and so forth. The other is truly improving security. And one example there that is a big initiative for us is around an initiative called confidential computing. And there's a confidential computing consortium that's open. Anyone can join. A lot of the big players from a technology perspective are members, including Intel, which is one of the co-founders. And Ash earlier said, you've got to protect the data in transit and at rest, which is of course true. We've had lots of controls to assist with that are very mature. What confidential computing is focused on is protecting data in use. So while it's in memory, while it's being operated on, making sure that only approved applications are accessing that data. And we have a technology called SGX, or software guard extensions, that we are that we've had for a number of years, but really launched with our mainstream last year with our last server processor launch. And that there's a growing ecosystem of software providers, cloud providers that are using this, and it essentially will enforce through the hardware all the way up through the technology stack that only applications with the right signature can operate on inside this encrypted partition. We call it a trusted execution environment. And I think, in my view, one of the, it's, I wouldn't call it nascent. It's a growing capability. I think it'll become the default way things are done as we go forward. Just like encryption today, you'll just say, of course, we protect the data in transit, at rest, and in use, while it's being operated on. I think one of the game-changing innovations this will let us do is stop moving the data around so much. So there's tons of challenges with moving data from replication to keeping it synchronized to, of course, the security and privacy requirements, GDPR, HIPAA that exist with personal data. If you can leave it where it resides, if you can encrypt a container and bring it into a virtual machine or an environment, right next to or alongside that data in a private data center or in a cloud environment, run the application, and only send back the derived results. That really will have game-changing benefits. I saw there was a question about blockchain. I would say blockchain is a class of that sort of distributed, federated architecture that that we're promoting, and I expect we'll see more of over time. And so that's the biggest area where we're trying to improve security, is around that, protecting data in use and in concert with the confidential computing consortium.
Really interesting stuff, Chris. And that discussion of data, I think, is a good transition to our third topic today, and they're all very much related to the whole healthcare IT modernization. But I want to turn our attention now to what's going on with Epic EHR system specifically, although there are other systems that have gone through the same kind of process, and there are more that will. But what's really going on is this expanding the infrastructure. It was in some ways a closed environment to an AIX architecture, and it's opened itself up now to a different kind of way of looking at that infrastructure. And it raises all kinds of options for organizations in the data center. And options are the key when you're involved with IT and healthcare, because you have to have different ways to go depending on how you're trying to serve your population. So let me start by asking Ash to describe for us what is really happening here. And Ash, give us an idea of what you think this does to the data center questions that are being asked and can be answered, and the way to approach things differently than you have?
Sure. No, thanks, Larry. So let's really talk in sense of Epic here, but kind of applicable to other major platforms, EHRs included as well. But coming down to Epic, right? Epic infrastructure was always supported on, or started supporting on, a risk-based or AIX-based model, but also they started supporting on x86 platform. Now, Epic has very specific requirements in terms of performance. They call it, IOPS and the other term. It will come back to me like GROPS or something.
GREPS.
GREPS. Exactly. Sorry. Thanks. So those performance requirements are based on the volume of that data that is going to be, put on that EHR system. And that driven the conversation of what platform can support that performance. And that's really where AIX or risk-based platforms were come into play. If you are higher data or higher transactions, then the x86 platform was not able to support that. Having said that, over the last several years now, the technology advancements has taken place, and the x86 platform has become comparable, if not more, with the risk-based platform to support the same kind of transaction volumes and give the same performance. Now, what happened also along the way is Epic uses underneath that is called cache database, which is from InterSystems. And that licensing model also used to be very specific platform-based. So if you want to convert from AIX platform to x86, there was a licensing conversion cost. Now those costs have, and that was a big number that you had to pay up front. And healthcare organizations, as we already talked, right, they are short on dollars. I mean, you implemented something, and then now you want to convert, you have to pay again. Those requirements of dollar investments has gone away. So now as you start thinking of looking at modernizing your Epic infrastructure, you look at what you already have. And if you are an AIX-based platform, that also means you have to have, and Jeff can attest to this, you have to have a specialized resources that knows AIX or Unix environments and to support those, right? As against x86, that is more commonly used across all other workloads, not just Epic or EHRs. So you can leverage those resources to support your Epic environment and don't have to manage the very specialized skill sets as well, which are hard to find, by the way, as we all know it. So that's some of those things that are happening in the Epic infrastructure world, where x86 platform has caught up. That helps you, gives economies of scale from not only from resource standpoint, but also from an infrastructure investment standpoint, as well as we all know Epic upgrades always looks for additional infrastructure resources, and it's now easier to manage those technical resources as well. I'll have Jeff kind of add his thoughts there, but that's really where I think Epic infrastructure modernization is going today.
Yeah, Jeff, please tell us about how you're using Epic and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, Ash, I think you said it well. We are, to give a little bit of a base, our Epic is obviously on-prem, just much similar to as Sirikant. We have 2 data centers. We run in an active passive format. We do fail across between those pretty much almost on every quarter as we do upgrades. But exactly, having that flexibility, it is a little bit different of having and managing that AIX infrastructure, the flexibility to add resources, sometimes a little bit more paperwork, sometimes a little bit more, it's not as flexible as what you can necessarily get, or and in some cases comfortable with in providing within the x86 and the Intel architecture. And so it's something that we're taking a look at. I mean, for us, we had it hit near and dear to us during COVID. And you think of when the vaccines first came out and everybody saw it come across the news, as to getting appointments and the delays in getting appointments and getting on, and appointments there 1 second, gone the next. And as they announced new eligible groups, everybody would get on, and people would figure out that we would release new appointments at 2 a.m. And by 2:01 they were gone. And we had to start adding in architecture in order to handle the demand. With what we had before, it worked fine, but all of a sudden, things that were quick and responsive were being hung. We're having different transactions, and it wasn't just the front end servers, but it was all the way through back to the back end, the application servers themselves, to the database, and watching for that contention. And apologize, but looking forward for us, we are excited to look at and see what type of possibilities that we can have by migrating to this option of migrating to Intel into their architecture, and what it provides for us. Given the size of our Epic environment and where things are, how heavily everything is integrated into it today, we kind of refer to it as where our center of gravity is. In Epic's requirements of constantly changing, and they're constantly it's very demanding to keep up with. We look forward to being able to hopefully take advantage of some of that flexibility, and allowing us to be more nimble with it.
Jeff, to give us a context, what's the population? What's the total number of people that are served by an Epic environment in your organization, roughly? Yes.
So good question. I mean, so we're roughly about 60,000 users, that including clinicians, and then we have a number of outside areas that come on. We serve north of about 1.2 million patients visits. We're servicing the whole city of New York. And all of the test and trace that you see on there, testing sites, everything else are coming through, and they're leveraging our MyChart. We were each of our servers were handling, I know at the peak of Epic, anywhere between 3,500 to 4,000 people at once. That we were, really kind of, we had some very interesting discussions back and forth with Epic on how do we maintain that, providing that end user experience, the patient experience, through MyChart, being able to access those appointments, be able and their normal services that they're used to, as well as the clinician side, right? Being able to treat and do their day-to-day jobs as well. So it's a very interesting balance for sure.
What do you think are the key factors that drive your decision to look at opening up the architecture of Epic and looking at the, a more open platform? Besides, I mean, what are the things that are really driving that?
Great question. I think the first one is going to be cost. As you mentioned, cost is important to us. One of our CIOs, like he said, any dollar that we save goes directly to our patients, right? So that's huge, and that's important. That's one. Where the flexibility, as you mentioned, but where's the technology going? Meaning, where is Epic? Where is InterSystems with Iris putting their efforts, their development, and within those environments as well, and watching these other partners that we have, and where are they putting their technologies, and where are they putting their emphasis, is also a driver. And then everybody has their challenges around resources these days. Where are our resources? Where's our knowledge, and where's our skill, that we can best support that environment as well?
Sure, I know you're looking at Epic, or you already have Epic, but what are your thoughts on how you're going to look at the data center, and are you looking at that kind of platform, an open platform like that?
Sure. As I mentioned before, we are affiliation, so every hospital has their own EHR platform today. Now the effort is to be standardized. So Epic is our direction. We made the investment into the Epic stack. But the way we choose to use the private hosted model from Epic. So Epic is going to host their the hardware infrastructure for us in their own data center. So they have their data centers in Chicago, like Wisconsin, as well as Minneapolis. So that those are the two data centers they're hosting their environment, maintaining the HA capability, maintaining the availability, scalability across their data center. So we are shifting our roles and responsibilities. So we are more like they are providing as a platform as a service. So we will be more like driving the application and above at the presentation mode, but anything below operating system all the way up to the hardware, that's where Epic is going to help us to drive the scalability and capability within the data center. But I guess as Jeff mentioned, definitely there will be a lot of integration between the other applications that is going to communicate with Epic. That is going to be hosted, and those are the applications that we are looking for rationalization and consolidation efforts. Whether it could be the platform, could be the SaaS base, or could be the on-premises. So those are going to be the key things that we're going to in next 24 months. Those are our focus on going to be.
Right. Interesting. So you've gone the Epic will manage it for you, essentially, the cloud environment. I see. Chris, as we look at this open architecture, right, this new approach from Epic, right, Intel is very much a part of that decision as they look at the technologies and the processing capabilities. Talk to us about, if you have some insight into the history of this and what drove this, and more importantly, what is Intel's position moving forward? How is it going to advance this technology and capability to really bring what everybody needs in the healthcare modernization space?
Yeah, sure. So not to go too far back in the history, but Intel way back when used to have our own RISC CPU platform that Epic supported. That was about the time I got into healthcare, when we shifted over to Xeon, which is our mainstream CPU product line. We moved a lot of what we call our RAS features, which is an acronym that stands for reliability, availability, and serviceability, that you find in really those very like electronic health record tier 1 kind of applications, are now all supported and have been for many years in our Xeon line. At that time, there was no Epic database that ran on Xeon because Epic didn't support it. That was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. Today, I think about 60% of their customer base is running their database on Intel. And there's not at least as far as I'm aware, there's not a single healthcare provider that has ever switched from Intel to IBM. It's only coming one way.
Sure.
And we have a fantastic collaboration with Cisco that can support any Epic customer, from the small to the large. Cisco has an 8-socket offering for the biggest of healthcare providers. We're even talking with Epic about customers that are going to need to support like 60, 90 million grefs due to the M&A activity you're seeing. Just the size of the Epic instances are getting enormous. But that can all be supported in Intel. If you're running, if you're taking advantage of Epic's own hosting service, that's Intel. If you are looking at AWS or Azure, that's all on Intel. And we are happy to work with anyone to help them switch over to. And really, one of the obstacles that Ash touched on was there was previously a license cost burden for some customers. That's now no longer the case. And so, I think IT shops just find it less or easier to manage a Linux or Red Hat, VMware, Cisco environment than the RISC environment. The patches are more frequent. They're updated. The security is improved continuously. Easier to find talent. People love vMotion and vSphere and all those features they become accustomed to, and so we're basically today in a scenario where there's really no no customer that couldn't run on Intel and take advantage of the benefits I just went through and reducing their IT complexity. And we've, in partnership with Cisco, anyone out there that's on AIX today and interested in switching, we've got programs and resources to support. Should you want to evaluate that move. And the last thing I'll say is, in the context of hybrid cloud and the modernization, some healthcare providers are looking at like training and DR in the cloud, and so you've got kind of what's a hybrid environment sometimes of, okay, I'm running these aspects of the Epic infrastructure in the cloud, this on-prem or in a colo, and just like the discussion we had across the application landscape, EHR is also going hybrid. But given all the application dependencies you typically have with an Epic environment, and of course the importance of Epic to the criticality of that application, it's probably one of the last classes of application to move to the cloud. But it's different parts of it are deployed across the diagram that's on the screen right now.
Great. I think it's great discussion, and I want to make sure I have time to thank the panelists for their time today. A very esteemed group, and I really enjoyed working with all of you and with Anthony as well. I want to ask you one parting question that's a tough one, but I think an important one is this. We experienced a pandemic like we've never experienced before in our lifetimes, and it really came from nowhere. Nobody really expected it to happen. That's the business of business, and that's the business of the way we operate, is that we don't know what is going to come next. What do you think is the best way to protect yourself as an IT healthcare modernization person from whatever comes next? Let me start with Jeff.
For a great question, and I'll start off with one of the first CIOs that we had when I was here. He'd always say, "Don't think legacy." So and I will say that one of the biggest pieces that I did learn during the whole pandemic and everything is the ability to be flexible, think outside the box. We're walking out to fields, tennis courts, and turning those into hospitals, vaccination centers, things like that. And I'm very fortunate to be a part of a team that rose to that challenge, figured it out, didn't complain. They took it, and at the same time, to have the confidence from the business to not ask if we can, but to just say, get it done. And have the confidence in us to do that. And I think by having that flexibility, by, keeping yourself, having great partners, but also keeping yourself modern and understanding modern technology and understanding how to best use that technology really prepares you for when those unknown challenges come in, and then proves for you to be a valuable business partner as well.
Excellent. Any last minute thoughts, Surikant, on
No,
how to prepare?
No, absolutely. That's well, what Jeff said, that now, like we discussed in last 90 minutes, we're talking about the business requirement, right? With this COVID brought that business is changing their mindset. They're saying that, okay, the user needs to be logged in or access from remote. So we are changing our IT architecture. It need to be very fluid architecture. It cannot be like a rigid, say that this is the only way it's going to work. So we have to go with the flow and make sure that we can provide. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that our user, our support, the patients, doctors should have access to the data. Now, how are we going to make that capable or enable that particular features and functionality? But at the same token, we have to make sure that we have the right security around that particular workflow. So we are changing our strategy as well, making our architecture more fluid and agile to make sure that we can accommodate any like a forthcoming events that we can have in future, that we can be ready for that.
Great. Ash, I'll give you 1 minute. 30 seconds. Go
thanks.
ahead.
Yeah,
Tell
no.
us what you think.
Absolutely right. I mean, Jeff and Suryakan already covered what I wanted to say, but I'll also add, right, making it flexible enough and making it available no matter where your workforce is coming in from. And so the security is big, but also making sure it is accessible.
Great. Appreciate it. Anthony, I don't want to run out of time here. Are there questions that you had seen? I didn't see anything. Let's see. Some of the anything that anybody saw that we should ask this panel?
I think we pretty much handled everything. There was a question that talked about security technology and blockchain for healthcare.
I saw that.
Ever come?
Yep.
Yeah.
I saw that,
So,
Anthony. I saw no code, low code technology too. That is very important. Chris, can you address some of that? I know you mentioned.
Yeah, I
blockchain,
can.
but you can talk more about it. Sure.
You know, it's the tip is a Gartner that has the hype curve and then the trough of disillusionment. You know,
Yes.
blockchain was as with many other new technologies, overhyped a few years ago. It hasn't gone away. You know, we're working with a great partner called Equidium Health, whose solution is based on the blockchain architecture. We're working with Leidos as a partner whose solution is based on the blockchain architecture. I think it's you know, now we're past the hype curve and we're seeing where it can apply to address real use cases, largely ones that where it's a network. It's a distributed group of different organizations that need to collaborate on some shared data while maintaining the security and privacy of that data. So blockchain is here. You don't hear the same hype you once did, but I'm confident going forward that you know, it will persist, and solutions that use blockchain will continue to be deployed. Intel's still a big supporter of it.
Hey, Chris, if you don't mind, I can just, before from my previous life, we did talk about the another healthcare industry as well as the manufacturing industries. The blockchain is definitely on the table, mainly from the ERP stand for supply chains, because we have those partners that we are the organization is talking to. So that is where they implemented the blockchain. If you look at the blockchain is not new new to the market. If you go back to the mainframe world, it's going to be all distributed architecture, eventually become converge, then hyper converge, and now we're going back to distributed architecture. So that's basically what we're talking about here.
Yep.
Anthony, anything else that you'd like to cover?
I think we pretty much covered everything. I thank you, Larry, for doing a great job. If you could throw up the last slide.
I will.
And I'd also like to thank each of the panelists. Super job again. And I'm real proud that the New York State chapter of HIMSS is able to find folks like yourselves who can come out and help educate and help open up a dialogue. Thanks very much for your participation today, all the folks that joined us. And this recording will be available. Give us about a day or two to get it up, both on our YouTube page and on our website. We're always looking for volunteers as well. So if anybody is interested in volunteering on any of our committees, please give us a shout. We'll be more than happy to accept anyone to join us. Everybody have a great afternoon. Larry and panelists, all super job. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.